Hi everyone, welcome back to Atlas Uncharted. It's been a while, but I'm here again with Wayne, back in our office.
Thanks a lot. We got a swivel mic this time. It's been a long time since lockdown. It's so good to be back seeing the kids and back working in the same space again.
Yeah, and just when we're getting into the groove of actually being regular for once with our podcast episodes, we had the whole situation happen, and we had a few of our video files sort of held hostage in the office while we couldn't be able to go in and pick them up. But we should be good now, and we're going to try and record a good backlog to go, so hopefully we can actually be semi-regular going into the new year. To get into our topic for today, we thought we'd talk about something a little bit interesting, a little bit, all-round useful for everyone. And today, Wayne and I thought we'd talk a little bit about how we've experienced self-reflection and goal setting, particularly in our time in high school, because that's, I guess, the longest period of our life that we've sort of gone through so far. And to try and share some insights we've learned from that and to see if anything's useful for you guys to know about.
Yeah, and the main context for this is really as we were wrapping up this term, we've finally gotten back into things with mentoring with the students as well. And one big focus of this term has really been about self-development, self-reflection, and self-growth, both because it's important in terms of being able to do well in an interview, right? But also mainly, the main reason why we want to do this, it's so that hopefully we can help the students grow, become more well-rounded people, and obviously we're quite early on this journey ourselves, so we can offer what little advice we have as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because I guess even with all the mentoring we want to do, we only have so much time with the kiddos, right? And when we were younger, we were lucky. We had really good role models, people to discuss and to watch from, and we had hours and hours of access to them. So we got to sort of get it drip fed. So I guess part of what we're trying to do here is to sort of add on to the shorter sequences of mentoring we've already been doing with our students. And hopefully for people who are not our students who are potentially listening right now as well, for you guys to also listen along and maybe, if not learn something, at least hear some interesting stories. So I thought it'd be nice for Wayne and I to have a think about all the times we've set goals or how we've gone about setting goals in high school, and I guess whether we succeeded or not and how we sort of reflected on that. So I guess to start off a bit broadly, I think one thing that both Wayne and I did that was quite different already from the average student is that I guess we had goals in the first place, right? A lot of times, a lot of students are sort of happy to go through and not have any particular drive, or maybe it's the short-term thing, like just whatever next assessment, whatever next pain point is coming up.
Going with the flow, right?
Going with the flow, which can take actually a few different meanings depending on what you think about what flow means. But I guess we won't get into that. I guess just to keep it simple, I think from what I've heard from other people as well, when I've talked to them, they've definitely said I'm much more of like the strategic type when I unpack how I think about things. Where it's like I would say every year I definitely, particularly the new year, like most people do, I definitely try and sit down and come up with a bunch of goals for the year. And to get into it a bit later as well, I think what I like to do, which is quite unique, is I like to set a bunch of really ridiculous, next to impossible to achieve goals. The trick is to still think you can achieve them. It's to deceive yourself into thinking it's totally possible if you just had the best year on Earth or in human history, right? But to just still hit it with 100% passion. And even if I failed those goals, which I basically did every single year, the progress I would make towards making them anyway would, I guess, if you compare me against my cohort, would put me way against them. And I guess even for myself, when I look back on it, I didn't have to beat myself over it too much because it was still pretty substantial.
Yeah, if I can jump in about that, I think those goal setting things that you did in high school worked really well, and they worked really well for you, and they probably would work quite well for a particular type of student, right? Obviously, we'll talk about goal setting and just how valuable that is, but you don't have to be out there setting explicit goals to grow as well, right? So high school is a time of lots of change, lots of development, lots of things happening, and hopefully for the better, right? No doubt that the only thing you need to be doing right now in order to make sure that you are growing, at the very simplest, the only thing you need is to just do stuff. Right? You don't even need to have goals in the first place. As long as you're doing stuff, then you are going to be somewhere on that journey of growing. The next step, obviously, is to start reflecting on what you've done and to see how that's helped you grow. And then if you can be even more analytical about it or strategic about it, as you say, then you can set those goals and that can help you even more. But at the very least, if you take away one thing, it's just go out there and do stuff. Do the extracurriculars, right? Try learn what you need in school classrooms, right? Learn a bit more extension if needed, right? Try ask your teacher more questions. If there's something that you don't get or something you want to do more, go do it, right? If there's something that you're at home and you want to do, go do it. If there's something that you want to learn and you can search for it on the internet, go do it. Anything you can do right now, you probably have plenty of time in high school, as long as you're not overloading yourself with stuff. Now's the time to go and grasp that stuff to do.
Mm, that's a really good point. I think to sort of get into the examples, I reckon just to like keep people, I guess, get some people hooked onto it. I'll start with, I guess, a really tangible example that's very academic focused, and then we're definitely keen to get into some more nuanced ones involving other things we did in high school as well. But I'll start with the hard hitting one, which is, despite what everyone says, like, I don't think I was particularly smart at the very start of high school, and so like in year seven, which is, I guess, is parts of stories I've probably mentioned before. Um, my goal was to get really good at science. I took kind of a weird approach to it. I kind of like, unlike other people, I wasn't particularly passionate about science. Like, like every other, I think, like young boy, we had those books on space and dinosaurs when you were younger. That's pretty, I think everyone did, and it's pretty awesome. But I think, it sort of died down a bit for me. Like, I knew a lot of friends in primary school who seemed much more into all the science stuff than I was. Um, but I took this really strange view. I was like, okay, English, maths, science, and all the other subjects as well. And I was like, if I want to do social good for the world, which discipline has the highest chance of social impact? And I was like, science is pretty good. It's the mix of like pure technical skills, a bit of innovation, and then impact on society if you do the right discoveries. I was of the mind that like, mathematics is a bit too hardcore. Like, I guess if you move in the financial thing, you might be able to, like, if you move to the corporate world, you can use your mathematics to maybe run big systems and optimize things. But I felt like that was less tangible. To be honest, back then, I didn't really see any purpose in English or any of the arts. I was like, they can't really do anything. I think I've mellowed out a little bit, but you know, they have their place in the world, but they're not the frontline people who will change things, I reckon.
I'm going to disagree with that. I'm not even qualified to disagree with that. But maybe we can talk about that one a bit later. Again, I'm sure your story is going to be helpful. Most of you guys probably aren't like that. Most of you, if you're in year 7 or 8 and you're watching this video, you're not going to be someone who's like, how do I go change the world in the most strategic way by deciding my disciplines for the next 2 decades, right? But hopefully at least the message of how to go about doing that is something we can learn from today.
Yeah, that's really good point. I think it's like I'm not saying this as a life lesson for people to follow. I absolutely do not recommend that. I think it was more so, I guess, a funny quirk about how I went around things. But yeah, for some reason or another, I picked science. I was like, that's cool. That's going to be my thing. And luckily, the way I decided on it was a bit odd. But once I started experiencing it, like I knew I liked it. So it worked out in the end. Like I feel like if it turned out I hated it, there wasn't any way I was going to force myself to stick with it anyway. So it still worked, but it was quite a strange way I started, I guess. But yeah, the point is, I wanted to get good at science. Bruce being a school with a lot of smart kids, we had people in our cohort who just knew way more science than they needed to as well. There's always one or two of those genius kids who are way ahead. There were kids in the older grade as well. And once again, we had some particularly great role models who were pretty awesome at science. Shout out to people like Minzao, right? And so I saw those guys and I was like, oh, that's the stuff I can aspire to. And so I set that for my goals, So I guess to keep that side of the story short, I was exposed to basically like the limit of high school level science, potentially even university level science when I was in year 7. At least people showed me what it looked like. People tried to teach it to me, and I really wanted to understand it. I really wanted to be someone who could do that, and I completely failed. All of year 7, I went to these classes. I tried to read these books. I tried to do these practice questions. I went through year 7 not understanding a single thing. And this is where I guess this method maybe doesn't work for other people, because looking back on it, I still have no idea why I kept doing it. Like why I somehow was motivated to keep trying even after failing like every week for a whole year straight, right? But once again, because of that crazy goal, I absolutely failed that goal. I did not master university chemistry, physics, biology, maths in year 7.
Yeah, no surprise.
But like I made a little bit of progress. I think back then it didn't feel like I made any progress. But then year 8, I did the same shit. I literally repeated for 2 years straight, just barely understanding anything. And as I tell people, the moment when all clicked for me was definitely in year 9. And it was just, I guess I'd been at it for long enough where, I don't know, for some reason it was like, one day I was just like, oh, I should just read this textbook. The backstory is I was given a chemistry textbook for my birthday. So, which I kind of asked for anyway. So this isn't like a terrible present. I always say it's one of my favorite presents I've ever received. To be honest.
If there's ever a moment of this podcast that shows everyone just how to touch with regular people we are, it's the phrase, "I got a chemistry textbook for my birthday and I liked it."
Losing your reliability. Yeah, I agree. But yeah, yeah, I don't know. I was just like, oh, I should just read it, and I started reading it, and for some reason, it just made sense. It was like I was reading like a normal book or like a fiction book. I was like, oh, I read the words, I understand the words. This is how it works. Um, and from there, year 9 was this moment of like extreme just growth. Like suddenly everything started making sense, and like other people didn't notice yet, right? I guess that's the other thing. If you yourself are embarking on a journey of self development and stuff like that, people are probably not going to notice for a while. But I reckon as long as you trust yourself and you feel like you're getting better, I think it's totally fine. I definitely went through that in year 9, and I guess time flew by so quickly, and I was so absorbed in it that I didn't even have time to think like, oh, why doesn't anyone notice that I'm awesome? I guess I was just too busy anyway. But basic point is the results finally showed. Year 10 was the first time I think that was where I really burst onto the scene. So I sat the science Olympiad exams. I tried a bit in year 8, year 9, didn't do too great. But year 10, sat it, freaking blasted it, got summer school offers for chemistry, biology, and earth science, all three. So it was just out of nowhere. So I guess context for other people. Basically, I scored close to the top 24 in the country for all three of those subjects, against people in year 11 and year 10 and year 11 who were sitting it when I was still in year 9. So that was awesome. And so everyone's like, whoa, Anto's this genius. And like that story is sort of continuing on. The rest of high school ever since then, everyone's like, Anto's this genius. But no one knew like those 3 or so years beforehand where I literally failed at everything, but I kept doing it anyway. And I think that's really reflective of just my whole mindset towards all these goals, which is let's just set really dumb, extreme goals that I believe in. I'm going to put all my effort towards them. If I fail, I was like, kind of crap, but I'll keep doing them anyway. And even so, I'll make a lot of progress. And eventually, I did break through after a few years of trying that. And that's probably like my most tangible success in life, right? Just literally just all of that science stuff and the fact that people think I'm smart. I think that all really originated from those few years of quiet work in the background.
Yeah, no, that's like the biggest thing I attached to Anto. Yeah, it's I think it's nice that you mentioned as well that your success story of just becoming this great science person has come from like 3 years of failure, of trying and failing and trying and failing and trying and failing, right? Just for anyone out there who's looking at successful people around you, know that that's always the reality. You're never going to see the failures, and so you always got to keep that in the back of your mind to not feel horrible. I'm really glad that we're finally doing an episode that's maybe not just about teaching, because when we talk about teaching, we just agree non-stop. Yeah. But look. So what you've just basically said is, I guess the one takeaway advice that you would say is set big aspirational goals and to go achieve them and to fail and then to try again and to fail and then to try again. Hopefully that's helpful for some of you guys. Personally, I know that would never work for me. So for me, nah, straight away, doesn't work because I'm going to fail one time at a big goal and I'm going to feel like shit and I'm just not going to try again for that particular goal. I'm just going to think I'm bad and just not try that again. Right, so if you're someone who's maybe a bit more like me on that front, then I would recommend don't do that. Right, actually set yourself up for success rather than setting yourself up for failure, because one way of saying that is setting yourself up for failure a few times until you get success. And to set yourself up for success in this front is to set yourself realistic and specific goals. Right, so that's the sort of classic advice. You want your goal to be relatively smaller, not hugely aspirational. Yes, you can have a vision, a long-term vision, a big aspirational thing, but you definitely have to break that down into smaller, you might even call it short-term goals, where it's small things that are achievable and also are quite specific. So small things, not wiffly waffly things like I'm going to get good at physics, but I'm going to read these 2 chapters from this physics thing and then do these questions by this set date within this time limit or something like that to keep your goals specific, realistic, and then you can go out and achieve them. Get that serotonin boost or dopamine boost from that little success. Let that make you feel good. Take that next step, set that next goal, achieve it again, and take those small steps rather than trying to jump across a river and then falling in. Is my advice.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because I know that when I've tried to do my reading in the past about like, all these books on like goal setting and personal development, everything I've done in my life is very contrary to what the pros say. It's very much Wayne's approach to sort of basically enjoying the small victories that lead to the bigger ones later down the line. One thing that's really interesting, I guess, is part of it might have been, the things I'm better at and the things I'm not as good at, because I've realized all of my crazy goals tend to be very academic focused. Whereas if I'm in a domain that I feel like I don't have any particular talent at, I am much more like a normal person in terms of how I set my goals. So things like fitness goals or even like sleep habit goals, they're very like normie people goals, if I want to call it that. So that might literally just be like some nuances where you might realize yourself, if there are things that you already have a lot of natural passion for and maybe a bit of talent for, then you can take that risk to try and push yourself as hard as possible. Like academics is one thing. I think maybe for both of us, I think teaching is a similar thing. I know for me, it's like I probably, to be honest, I don't think I've ever been demotivated by like seeing someone teach better than me. Like that's one thing where I have a lot of already existing confidence in my ability, but also a lot of passion for the art of teaching as well, that I just really want to get better through any means. It's sort of like, I guess, I don't know if it's too much of a tangent, but it's like I can watch someone teach and maybe I'm better than them at like everything except for one thing. And if that's the case, I'll watch them be like, yo, that guy's awesome at that one thing. And I can pick that up. Like the other stuff, if I'm better than them, I can't, whatever. I'll like try and find the thing to learn from. So I think teaching, the way I can approach learning how to teach better is the same way I would approach like just learning science, where I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to get discouraged. I'm just going to set these stupid, crazy goals and go for it. So I've noticed there's that dichotomy, and that might be a useful thing for people to realize which sort of mindset they want to take towards various goals based on their talents, I guess.
Yeah, just to wrap this up, I really like your hypothesis, and I think I would agree with that as well. Because same thing for teaching. At the start, when I first started teaching, it was easy to get demotivated because I just didn't have that self confidence. But now it's been a few years down the line. I know I still have a long way to go and a lot more improvement to go, but I no longer need to set those small goals for myself. Or at least I'm happy to just say I want to get good at teaching. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. Yes, you still need a plan and small steps, but you don't need those small little dopamine kicks to keep you going. Another one for me was when I first started learning guitar for myself in year 7 or year 8 or something. Um, that was something where I had enough motivation and enough prior musical knowledge to just be like, okay, I just want to get good. So just every single time I play, I'm just going to keep on playing and just keep on doing more stuff, and I'm never really going to get demotivated. So good point. Let's move on.
Do you want to talk to other examples of us going through goal setting, I guess, moving beyond academics?
Oh yeah.
So, we've had a bit of a chat off camera to see some interesting things that have happened in our high schooling lives that'd be nice to bring up. I guess the one I'll probably first move into is cadets, probably, in leadership. So, backstory, I was involved in cadets in Bruce. I went through to basically the highest rank, CLO. So just from very start to end. Enjoyed it a lot. Got 1 or 2 nice little awards in the middle as well for being particularly good in certain years. It's been very helpful in terms of all the skills I've learned in the future as well, being able to communicate and run groups. So 100% positive experience. Oh, I liked all the camps and stuff. That was also great. So that's all great. In terms of goals I set for them, actually, I hadn't thought about this. But it's a very obvious goal that I set for myself that I achieved, which was I think on my first day when I came in as a recruit, they asked an icebreaker question to every cadet, and they're like, "Why'd you join cadets?" And everyone gives all these rubbish answers, not to throw shade on people who can't defend themselves here right now. But everyone's answers are always so crap. Like it's like, "Oh, my parents made me. Oh, I guess it's interesting," or even if they're like, "Oh, I want to, build life skills or something." Like I feel like that was still a bit generic. Anyway. Not to be too judgmental. I mean, we're all year 8s and we didn't really know anything. And once again, I was kind of the weirdo. But I don't know, everyone gave kind of iffy answers. But I just straight up, they were like, I think the first one was, they were like, "Oh, why'd you join cadets?" I said, "Oh, I want to hold the sword." Because it's like I guess context for other listeners once again. At the highest ranks, at the ceremonies, you actually get like a ceremonial sword that you use. And there's like various like drill maneuvers you can do with it. It just looks cool. It's just like it's a it's a socially acceptable version of like cosplaying with a sword. That's it. Right? Yeah, exactly. That was the thing, right? They were like, exactly. And even more beyond that, I guess that was more my joke answer, but they told me, they were like, oh, well, to have the sword, you need to be a COO. And my next response, which I guess was a bit of a dick move, but like literally with no hesitation, I basically said, well, you better make me a COO then. Right? And yeah. So like I did make that, and I think it was really interesting because now that I think about it, I guess getting to our top rank was always a goal within cadets, but like I never cared about it too seriously. I think I had the privilege of not caring about it too seriously because um, for the people who like have done cadets, I guess Wayne's story might be a little bit different because he sort of got in a little bit later. But when you're in from the start, it's kind of clear who makes it through to the next round because the vast majority of people are there just to participate for fun. The ones who are really keen. There's basically enough spots for all of them really to get ranks if they would like, um, across a progression. So I reckon it was never too like competitive. It wasn't like I had to purposely do certain things to make myself look good to others for a few years. No, I just participated, did things I was passionate about, and just made sure I was on top of my game. And that just worked out. So that was all good. But I guess to contrast that, as I went through cadets, obviously I started realizing that there were more serious goals and responsibilities to think about in terms of being cadets. And one of the big ones that is always instilled in us is basically to carry it forward. To basically like for your final year when you're the senior command, so when you're the leadership who runs everything, dictates what gets taught, how the parades are run, what the big activities you work up towards are throughout the year. You obviously want to make a good year for everyone to enjoy because that's sort of your legacy for like your cohort and stuff. And so there's always this pressure to make sure your year like basically isn't the one that f's it up, right? It's good, it's consistent, and it's something that especially the older ones, when they come back and they see you at these ceremonies and stuff, that they're like, oh yeah, we're proud of these guys. Like they're not like embarrassed or anything like that. Yeah, fair enough. That's a very good point. And so I was always like a little bit scared of that, I guess, because I guess the other part of the story is the grade that was directly above us. I had a lot of respect for. Like the leadership there, I really respected those guys. I really looked up to them, and I actually hung around them quite a lot. I definitely spent a lot less time with my grade, I think, compared to normal students. And I kept hanging out with the older students. But yeah, I honestly just really looked up to those guys. And so the reason why I was such a good cadet and I got all those awards in the middle was basically my life was so easy. It was basically this. And it's the reason why I mentioned, even though it looks like our future is going to be us being leaders and entrepreneurs and stuff, I kind of wonder if I'd be a good employee. Where like, okay, the context is like, all I'd do is I would, sit down one day and I think, okay, what are my senior leaders thinking? What's on their mind? What's stressing them out? What are their goals? What can I do to best help them in that capacity? And that's literally it. Like, I didn't even do anything fancy. It was just like, I see like, on a BIV, so on one of our camps, these dumbass juniors are running around leaving rubbish all over the place. That's going to be a pain in the ass. I know these officers are going to get yelled at if the older teachers come in the morning and they see rubbish everywhere. I'm going to walk around and start picking up rubbish and tell some people to do that. Once again, it was like, I guess from the outside, it looks kind of like kiss-assy, I guess, but that was literally all that was going on in my mind. Like, how do I make their lives easier? How do I help them accomplish their goal? And like, they noticed that. So like, going through all those early years, I was like, basically just stand out number one. Everyone's like, oh, freaking Anto's just on the ball, so good. But then I realized that the shock was in that senior year when I finally got that position. I had no goals of my own for the cadet unit. And I was like, wait, like what do I do? I can follow orders, but I don't really have anything I want to achieve with the unit. And that's when I got a bit more paranoid about, like, oh, what can I even accomplish in this final year? Isn't it good? And I would say like a really short summary of it, because I've gone on for quite a while already, is I would say in that final year, I reckon my quality or my leadership as a cadet definitely diminished. In all the previous years, I'd be happy to say I was like the best or second best maybe amongst my cohort, where I was just like, whatever role I was in, I did it with quality. I brought the groups together. I innovated on at least one front, like it was just good, and I was proud of it. Definitely in that final year, which I don't know, you can argue HSC had a mix in it. Maybe I had to start diverting my attention. But I do think a bit of it was just a lack of direction. And that's something I noticed where I was always like, not the best anymore, but not much I can do about it. But like, that was sort of like my situation. And I've had some thoughts about it, but I'll chuck over to Wayne though, because I've been talking for a bit too long. But
Yeah, you can tell we haven't done a podcast in a while because we're just rambling so long, and it's fun. I'm enjoying this, so I don't really know what our plan is. I think there's actually a lot to unpack there. So I only really got up to corporal, lance corporal, or corporal in cadets. I really didn't do much because I joined so late, so I don't have too much to say about that. One of the goals of today's podcast was actually to talk about self-reflection of the things we've done in order to sort of suss out what skills we developed in each of those things that we did, right? And so when you were just describing what you did as just a younger cadet, where you were that rubbishing story and thinking about what the people above you, what would help them, really, ironically, that itself is actually the skill of leadership, right? The skill of leadership being understanding how you can help others and then to move forward as a team, right? So it's very ironic for you to say that you experienced more leadership or you felt like you were harnessing more of your leadership potential in a lower rank than actually in a higher one, which I think is pretty funny, slightly paradoxical. And it's also an interesting one where you said, yeah, you were sort of, once you actually got up to the top spot, you sort of didn't really have direction. And again, I don't really have much like a conclusion on it, but I just find it really interesting to hear that, maybe it's just sort of, it's because it wasn't something that you did. It's because cadets isn't, own cadets. You're part of a whole, you're part of a community. It's for the greater good, right? And so it's sort of maybe harder to, maybe it's actually selfish to bring in your own vision and try to change everything into the way that you want to do. Right? Maybe actually the more leadership thing to do is to maintain the status quo, or at least to try and improve on it, which I think is interesting. My story that's sort of relevant to that is when I was in high school, I did like a similar thing, but for Amnesty. So we had a Roosts club, like a club under the Amnesty International branch. If you're anyone at home who doesn't know, it's mainly just about human rights and sort of things, right? So every week,
social justice group.
yeah, it's a social justice group. Yeah. Every week we have like one meeting for like half an hour, talk about stuff, maybe plan events, maybe learn things relevant to the content. And then occasionally, maybe once a term or every few terms, we might hold a school event for people outside of the club as well. And yeah, I gradually sort of made my way up. So joined late year 7, learned about the things, saw a few leaders go through, saw how they did things, learned a bit about it. In hindsight, nowhere near enough for me to really have ever become an authority on it. And in hindsight, maybe I should have had a bit more, maybe I should have been a bit more insecure about just how little I really knew and just how deep the rabbit hole goes. But I suppose when you're in high school, you really don't have that much perspective. I'll blame it on the system rather than myself. And so I gradually made my way up. One year I was like a supporting exec, and then the final year that I was there, I was a president. And then after that, I was sort of just hanging around, trying my best to support the grade below me, but not really doing that much. Really, in fact, I don't think I really did that much. And yeah, like doing it, going through. If we're talking about the self-reflection and sort of the development of skills, right? I probably learnt a lot in terms of the actual content related to social justice things. I feel like it develops my worldliness and my sense of empathy and just growing up and becoming a more well-rounded person. That was really valuable for me. And then for us, once I took on a more leadership role, actually trying to do some more planning sort of stuff, working on management skills for us and doing events and stuff as well, developing those skills. And all of that was really helpful, as well as obviously public speaking. If you're the president, you get up there and you stand and you talk to your group of 30 or 40 kids once a week, and you try to make them not fall asleep and you try to keep them coming because they don't have to come, right? And it's really easy to just not come, right? So that was that. One of the biggest things I learned when doing it was and I don't even know if this is just a complete random tangent, but um, when I got up into the leadership position, one of the big things that I wanted to change, and this is where maybe our stories diverge a bit, because I did have sort of a vision about what I wanted to change. And I wanted to change the club. At the time, we sort of did quite a lot of events, quite a lot of them seemed quite shallow, with no disrespect to the people before me, right? With hindsight, I realized that there really was no right answer here. There were pros and cons to no matter what approach you took, but I at the time really wanted to try bring more depth to it and try to make things really a lot more about the issues and things. And in doing so, um, really, I failed. When I was the president, there were quite a few things that I did that in hindsight probably didn't do too great. I think the club probably shrank a bit in terms of the people who were coming to the club. I would like to think that maybe the people who came were potentially more informed and growing a bit better because of it, right? But that was a thing that happened. We did less events, and so our engagement with the rest of the school wasn't as good, and and that was a thing that looking back, yeah, maybe not the best. And personally, on a more personal level as well, I really had to develop my interpersonal skills, especially when we were dealing with working with the school executive and things like that. And so there was more failures and learnings that I had to take from that too. Point of the story though, wasn't perfect, didn't necessarily achieve the goals that I went out to do, but doing the thing and actually going out there and trying the things was the whole point of the exercise, right? Giving it a go, both in Amnesty, both in cadets, and getting your way all the way to the top or whatever, trying it, giving it a go, was the learning opportunity, right? And so back to the main point. It's if you want to learn, if you want to grow, do things right now. Gonna make mistakes, gonna get things right, gonna make mistakes. It's okay. That's how you learn. That's how you grow.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point, and I guess it's like we're still not sure what to call this, right? Is it all about self-reflection, or is it goal setting, or is it both? And I think this is really important, right? Because as Wayne was saying, in terms of goal setting, you just got to do things and experience things. And then in terms of reflection, this is where like hopefully you guys get a taste of how useful this can be, as long as like we're still understandable, right? Because like it almost feels like when even back when I was a student and reflecting all these things, as you guys have heard, we've been reflecting on like the nature of leadership, the nature of purpose, the nature of impact, and what it looks like, and sort of legacy, and how that impacts on how you should act and things like that. Versus smaller and big groups, how you make sure everyone's happy. All these things. Very very complex matters, right? Stuff that the ordinary high school student wouldn't be thinking about. It's very much sometimes it feels like when we have these chats, it's almost like, was it like the um, was it Sun Tzu, just sitting there meditating and writing the art of war, just all these complex musings.
We are not Sun Tzu, but
But like, yeah, the point is like, after we had all those thoughts, meditating on all these things, like, man, there were some clear advantages we had when we got to uni and we tried any of these ventures in the future. Even with Atlas, like having all this background puts us so ahead of the game when it comes to just making the right call and having the experience thinking through these tricky dilemmas. It's so tangible how helpful these experiences have been.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. Doubling down on that one I strongly agree with. And it's gonna come in ways that you don't expect as well, right? Like when I was doing the things in terms of just my reflection at the time, in terms of what skills I developed, it was really just small things like I can plan events better, I can talk to people a bit better, right? But the actual skills, the experience, the confidence, the can you actually work with someone properly? Like the whole reason why I have the confidence to work with you, Anto, so closely on Atlas is because we've worked together before multiple times in Amnesty, cadets, deep think, discussion group that we started as well that maybe we're not going to talk about right now.
Even like every band thing, like a lot of the musical things, just like I think another nice thing. I guess this is a very specific Roost thing, but I guess it might be true for other schools that do a lot of ensembles, but I don't know for sure. I think there's a lot of bonding that goes on when you're just staying after school, especially when there's like a performance night and you're there after school, the lights are all down, it's dark, you're just there, you're exhausted. Sometimes you're a bit depressed because you're not really rehearsed ready, and you're about to come up on stage and it's not going to be great. Yeah. It's going to be a bit ugly, yeah, and just like, especially like for both of us, if you were in multiple ensembles and it was just a shit show in the background, you were just handing off instruments, other people running around backstage to make the next performance. You build a lot of trust with the people who you've gone through that with. So, as Wayne said, all those experiences really help. And I guess I don't know if that's what people think about when they say friendship, but I guess even if it's not, it's more of like teamwork, cohesion, and trust. That sort of stuff that we've built up with all those experiences.
Words. So, just a bonus, right? Do these things so that you can find the Anto to your Wayne and the Wayne to your Anto as well.
That's pretty good.
Hey. Hey.
Oh man. Let's move on to a slightly different part. So hopefully some of the experiences we've shared today have been helpful, and once again, if not helpful, at least they were maybe entertaining stories. Sometimes I feel like aspects of my life you can just tell other people, you'd be like, I once talked to this guy, he did this thing, you won't believe it. So maybe I can immortalize myself through those secondhand stories.
They might just be saying, "Who is this weird ass guy reading chemistry textbooks in year 7?"
Yeah. Oh my god. What a life. What a life. But yeah, we still want to pivot more towards you guys, all the listeners now. Once again, this is a bit presumptuous. Maybe you guys have got your shit together already, but whatever. We'll assume that you would like some advice on this topic.